drift into sleep as we imagine a world shaped by a single, unbroken Mongol Empire. Tonight, we'll trace soft hoofbeats across the steppe, follow caravans along moonlit roads, and listen for the quiet hum of life in cities where East and West once met. But before we start, make sure you're comfortable. Turn on the fan if you need to, pull the blankets close, and let yourself sink into the quiet. And if you'd like to keep traveling with me through history, do well to like this video and subscribe. Let me know in the comments where in the world you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I love seeing how our little community is scattered all across the globe. Some of you in snowy kitchens, others hiding from the heat under ceiling fans. I promise I won't judge if you've fallen asleep before the end. That's the whole point. Now, with the world growing still, let's begin our journey.
Settle a little deeper into your pillow and picture the great grasslands of Central Asia just after dawn. Low light spills across an ocean of grass, each blade bending as the breeze slips by. Out here, horizons don't end so much as blur into the sky. For thousands of years, this was a quiet stage. Herds drifting, nomads following the seasons, tribes gathering for trade or, just as often, for arguments over grazing rights. Into that sweep of earth and sky rode a man named Temujin, the son of a minor chieftain. He was born around 1162 near the Onon River. His childhood wasn't the sort of story that makes you envy the past. Rival clans poisoned his father. His family was left to fend for themselves, and winter nights were cold enough to make you thank modern central heating. Yet Temujin learned early that loyalty, patience, and a knack for strategy could turn the world. By his mid-30s, he had drawn the Mongol tribes under one banner. Warriors who once stole each other's sheep now trained together, organized in units of 10, 100, 1,000. They learned to read the wind, to live for weeks from the saddle, to loose arrows at full gallop with unnerving accuracy. He took the title Genghis Khan, meaning, roughly, universal ruler, which tells you something about his ambitions. There were probably humbler job titles available, but moderately important steppe administrator doesn't have the same ring. Genghis set out to do something nomads had rarely done, build a state large enough to outlive him. He introduced written law, a census, diplomatic envoys. Merit mattered more than noble birth, an idea as refreshing then as finding a cool spot on your mattress in July. He encouraged the exchange of ideas and tools, adopting siege engines from the Chinese, postal relays from the Persians, and any talented person willing to switch sides. By the 1220s, Mongol horsemen thundered across northern China, Central Asia, Persia, and into the Caucasus. They were fast, disciplined, and, contrary to later legend, often pragmatic with conquered peoples. Craftsmen were spared, scholars invited to serve, merchants welcomed. Whole cities sometimes surrendered without a fight simply because the alternative looked unwise. After Genghis's death in 1227, his sons and grandsons carried the standard farther, into Korea, Russia, Poland, Hungary, and the Middle East. They pushed as far as the fringes of Europe, where knights in heavy mail learned that galloping archers could be inconveniently hard to catch. The empire became the largest land realm in history, stretching from the Pacific to the Black Sea. Think of it as the medieval version of a long-haul flight, except you stopped for fermented mare's milk instead of coffee, and the in-seat entertainment was mostly singing around a fire.
This astonishing network gave rise to what later scholars called the Pax Mongolica, the Mongol Peace. Roads and relay stations stitched the continent together. A merchant could leave Venice with bolts of cloth, travel east under imperial permits, and months later arrive in a bustling Chinese market. Spices, paper money, glassware, furs, medical texts, and astronomical charts passed between worlds that had once been strangers. Even a few secret recipes made the journey, though sadly none for pizza, which would have saved countless generations of travelers some serious disappointment. Life inside this vast empire wasn't just about armies and trade. It was everyday scenes scattered like beads across an enormous necklace. Picture herders tending flocks along the Orkhan River, pausing to watch imperial riders splash through the shallows, leather satchels of dispatches in hand. Imagine blacksmiths in Samarkand hammering out horseshoes while gossiping about distant wars. In Chinese towns, scholars discussed Confucian classics under the new rule, their voices drifting through courtyard pavilions. On the steppe, families gathered inside felt-lined yurts, sipping tea thick with butter, sharing stories of ancestors and fox spirits. The Mongols themselves held to a simple rhythm: ride, camp, hunt, herd. Yet they were also great curators of culture. They collected scribes fluent in Persian, Chinese, Uyghur, and Arabic, and protected Buddhist monasteries and Islamic scholars alike. Even Christian envoys from Europe found a cautious welcome. It was a world surprisingly open for its time, as long as you paid your taxes and didn't upset the horses. But, like campfires, empires are fragile if left untended. After Kublai Khan, Genghis's grandson and founder of the Yuan dynasty in China, the realm began to unravel. Distance complicated rule, and rival princes squabbled over succession. By the late 13th century, the once unified empire had split into four main khanates: the Yuan in China, the Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia, the Il Khanate in Persia, and the Golden Horde in Russia. Though they shared roots, these khanates often bickered like siblings fighting over an inheritance.
This fragmentation changed the rhythm of life across Eurasia. Trade slowed in some places, and local rulers found room to carve out their own paths. The once seamless corridor between east and west grew patchier, dotted with new tolls, local wars, and the occasional suspicious border guard. Caravans still ventured out, but the road felt a little less certain. A little more like you should have packed extra tea and a sturdy sense of humor. As you rest here, halfway between history and dreams, picture the empire at its height. Banners fluttering in a cool dawn, markets alive with chatter, riders setting off along endless tracks. The world held its breath then, balanced between possibility and change. Soon, we'll imagine what might have happened if those winds of unity had kept blowing, carrying one rule from the Pacific surf all the way to the gates of Europe. But for now, let the image settle. Open plains, silver rivers, and a sky wide enough to cradle an entire civilization. If you're still awake, well done. You've outlasted quite a few listeners by this point. And if you're already drifting off, that's exactly where the story wants to take you.
Take a slow breath and imagine the empire you just wandered through never broke apart. The four khanates, Yuan, Ilkhanate, Chagatai, and Golden Horde, never pulled in different directions. Instead, the riders who once argued over succession found a way to share their saddles, keep the lines of power clear, and pass the banners smoothly from one ruler to the next. A single dynasty held the realm together, and the road across Eurasia stayed as steady as a taut bowstring. Picture this: a courier leaving Beijing with a leather satchel of imperial edicts, bound for Kiev. He changes horses every 20 miles at fresh relay stations, galloping through dusty plains, mountain passes, and river valleys, never once fearing brigands or rival toll collectors. Weeks later, he arrives at the gates of a Rus city, his uniform still neat, his seal intact, and his message ready to be read aloud in a hall hung with banners. That was the beating heart of this unbroken reign, the Yam system, a chain of postal relays perfected by the Mongols. In our alternate world,
This system becomes the nervous system of an empire stretching across 12 time zones. Messages travel faster than whispers, binding governors, generals, and markets together. Even a scholar in Persia could request a manuscript from China and have it delivered within months, wrapped in oilskin and sealed with wax. Admittedly, still slower than email, but with far fewer spam scrolls. Now imagine what life feels like under such a stable empire. Farmers on the Ukrainian plains sow wheat, rice, and barley with confidence, knowing tax collectors will arrive regularly but predictably. Their children grow up speaking not only local dialects, but also a trade language shaped by Mongol administration, a blend of Turkic, Persian, and Chinese phrases, enough to bargain with passing caravans.
In Central Asia, market towns thrive. Samarkand glows with lanterns as merchants display silks, spices, glassware, and paper. Coins clink from many corners of the empire: silver from Central Europe, copper cash from China, and even stamped paper notes. Trust in Mongol governance keeps them all flowing, one empire's signature scribbled across every transaction. Walk a little further into one of these caravanserais at dusk. You hear accents from Baghdad, Delhi, Novgorod. A Venetian trader sits cross-legged beside an Ouider clerk, both eating lamb skewers fresh off the coals. Behind them, a Persian astronomer is debating with a Chinese monk about the stars, each sketching constellations on the packed earth. The air is thick with the scent of cumin, smoke, and horse sweat, and a faint chorus of snores from travelers who fell asleep early after too much fermented mare's milk. The empire's structure would have hardened into something unique, neither a Chinese-style dynastic court nor a European monarchy, but a blend of both. The great Khan rules from a capital, perhaps still Khanbalik, today's Beijing, yet he delegates authority across provinces. Local rulers keep their customs but answer to a central code, the Yasa. Judges in Bukhara consult both Islamic law and imperial edicts. Governors in Kiev weigh Russian Orthodox tradition alongside Mongol taxation records. A Buddhist monk and a Nestorian priest might both find themselves summoned to a provincial council, their voices counted equally in debates about schools or land grants. It isn't utopia, of course. No empire that large avoids friction. There are still squabbles over grazing land, feuds between merchant guilds, and the occasional argument about who borrowed whose horse without asking. But because the system never shatters, disputes are usually settled by appeals up the chain, rather than by full-blown war. Close your eyes and imagine yourself as a traveler under this unbroken reign. You start in Tabriz, in Persia, a city alive with blue-tiled mosques and bustling markets. You decide to visit Hangzhou on China's eastern coast. Under fractured history, that would be a risky, uncertain journey. But in our imagined world, you secure a passport, a small tablet stamped with the imperial seal. With that, relay stations open their doors to you. Meals are offered and fresh horses provided. Soldiers nod respectfully and wave you through. Your caravan follows the Silk Road east, passing through Samarkand, Kashgar, the Gobi Desert, and into the heart of China. Along the way, you encounter no border guards demanding bribes, no rival khans fighting in the distance. Instead, you fall asleep each night with the certainty that the empire stretches ahead, uninterrupted, like the Milky Way above you. And when you finally arrive in Hangzhou, you find goods from your own home already waiting. Persian rugs, Baghdad glassware, maybe even a letter from family carried by the yam. The empire makes the world feel smaller, as if continents themselves are neighbors. Now, think of what such stability would mean for knowledge. In real history,
Printing, gunpowder, and navigational tools trickled west, but unevenly. In this alternate path, ideas ride the Yam as easily as orders. Chinese almanacs reach Paris a century earlier. Persian medical treatises are read in Nanjing. Scholars gather at great imperial fairs. Imagine a Congress of the Steppe, where mathematicians from Delhi argue with Mongol officials about calendars, and Arab physicians demonstrate new surgical tools beside Confucian scholars debating ethics. The empire doesn't invent new science out of nothing, but it accelerates what already exists. Telescopes appear earlier, maybe even centuries before Galileo. Cartography flourishes as surveyors map the empire's endless provinces. By the time Europeans begin their voyages of exploration, they might already find Mongol-sponsored charts waiting for them at ports, neatly annotated with notes like, "Beware, very cranky sea."
Daily speech itself would shift. Imagine a lingua franca, a blend of Mongolian grammar, Persian vocabulary, and Chinese characters for writing. Traders from Venice might pepper their speech with Turkic words, while a farmer in the Volga basin casually counts his sheep using numbers that echo Sanskrit. For children growing up in this empire, multilingualism would be as ordinary as learning lullabies. This polyglot world carries a quiet humor, too. You might overhear an innkeeper in Samarkand muttering in 4 languages just to properly complain about a customer who won't stop asking for real coffee. At night, the empire settles into calm. Lanterns burn in caravanserais, smoke curls from yurts on the steppe, bells toll softly in Russian churches. Across thousands of miles, families sit by fires, all living under one banner, one seal, one line of authority stretching unbroken from the Pacific surf to the Carpathian forests. And in this imagined stillness, the greatest change is psychological. People trust the road. They know that whether they are in Persia or China, the same empire holds the sky above them. That trust smooths the rough edges of life. Merchants risk longer journeys. Scholars take bolder steps. Farmers plant with hope. Children grow up hearing stories not of fearsome raiders, but of the wide empire they belong to. That is the unbroken reign. Not a perfect paradise, but a steady rhythm. Hoofbeats on the road, markets alive with voices, cities glowing under one rule. And as you drift with that image, remember, history as we know it bent another way. The empire fractured, roads grew uncertain, borders hardened. But for tonight, let yourself imagine the world as it might have been. One saddle, one seal, one empire, stretching forever across the steppe.
Drift with me into the moonlight as the caravans stir. Imagine the world beneath the hooves of Mongol horses, a world where the empire never broke apart, and the Silk Road stayed open, guarded, and alive. The steppe winds are steady, the horizons endless, and every path leads to another culture waiting just beyond the next dune. This is a world of connection, not collapse. So let's walk it together, slowly, step by step, lantern in hand. The real Mongol Empire, in our history, did something astonishing for its time. They created a corridor of trade and exchange so safe, so reliable, that merchants could cross from China to the Mediterranean under one protection, the Pax Mongolica. Silk, spices, glassware, manuscripts, and medicines flowed. So did ideas, stories, and technologies. For a brief century, the world was smaller than it had ever been. But in truth, this moment was fleeting. The empire fractured, khanates split, and rivalries grew. Roads that once shimmered with travelers became dotted with outposts of suspicion. That unity dissolved. Now, in our imagining, let's reverse the hourglass. Picture the empire never fracturing, its vastness held together by a single lineage of Khans who understood that their power lay not in endless conquest, but in endless connection. And so the Silk Roads remain not just a legend of history, but a living artery, centuries long. Close your eyes and hear them, the bells on camel necks, tinkling softly in the cool desert air, the crunch of hooves on gravel, a merchant muttering to himself, half dozing as he walks beside his animals. He has been on the road for weeks, but he knows tonight's camp will be safe because the Empire's patrols keep the paths clear of raiders. The stars hang bright, so bright they feel close enough to brush with your fingertips, and the caravan follows them like a map across the sky. Alongside him walks another trader, perhaps from Venice or Genoa, his beard crusted with dust, his eyes wide with the strange sights he's already passed. He smells spices in the bags slung over the camels, cinnamon, pepper, and cloves, sharper than any kitchen in Europe has ever known.
And if you listen closely, the laughter of children follows too, because caravans carried more than just goods. Families traveled, cooks traveled, musicians traveled. Imagine falling asleep in your tent, lulled by the strum of a rabab or the plucked notes of a Chinese pipa, played by strangers who became companions under the same night sky. Now we arrive, lanterns bobbing, in the market of Samarkand, the beating heart of the roads. The Mongols have kept it alive as a jewel of trade, and it has grown, not shrunk, under their care. Walk the stalls slowly. Here are bolts of silk so fine they seem like woven water. Next to them, baskets of saffron glow gold. Turmeric stains fingertips yellow. You lift a fig, dried and sugared, and it tastes like sunlight stored for months. One stall sells glassware from Syria, delicate as breath. Another offers bronzed mirrors from China. Under a wooden awning, books are traded like treasure. Arabic medical treatises, Buddhist sutras, Greek philosophy carried east by curious hands. Now pause a moment. You see a Mongol guard leaning against a wall, watching over the market with calm eyes. He yawns. Clearly, guarding the heart of world trade is sometimes less dramatic than it sounds. Maybe he's wondering what's for supper. Maybe he's daydreaming of home. Empires are grand, yes, but they are also built on ordinary people standing around waiting for the shift to end. Here's the fascinating thing about this eternal Mongol Empire. Religion doesn't fracture here. The Khans, in our imagining, continue their policy of tolerance. Step into the city, and you might pass a mosque, its call to prayer echoing like a river through the streets. Just beyond, a Buddhist temple glows with lantern light, where monks chant in a deep, steady rhythm. On another street, a Nestorian Christian church offers its own evening hymn. The Mongols, practical, horse-born, broad-minded, allowed them all to exist side by side. Not without tension, of course. A few arguments probably broke out in bakeries when one customer wanted flatbread without butter during Lent, while another insisted on sesame oil as proper. But overall, tolerance reigned. In this alternate world, it continues, century after century, weaving spiritual diversity into the empire's fabric.
Now picture the movement, not only of spices and silks, but of minds. Knowledge travels as easily as any caravan, and here the empire becomes a university without walls. Gunpowder, once a closely guarded Chinese secret, now becomes a global technology centuries sooner. Italian engineers sketch catapults, then swap notes with Persian metallurgists who share them with Indian artisans. Printing presses don't wait for Gutenberg. They spread, Mongol-backed, from China across to the Middle East, accelerating the reach of the written word. And medicine thrives. Imagine walking into a caravanserai at night, tired from the road, and overhearing physicians debating across languages. An Arab doctor describes blood circulation. A Chinese healer outlines the balance of qi. An Indian physician speaks of surgical instruments. They disagree, yes, but each learns something new to carry back home. The Mongol Empire becomes not only a road of goods, but one of cures, inventions, and ideas. But let's not only talk about the grand things. The power of a world like this lies also in its small, gentle corners. Picture a roadside inn. The empire built them at intervals, safe havens for the weary. Tonight, a traveler slips inside, his legs aching from the saddle. A pot of stew simmers on the fire, lentils, mutton, and a pinch of spice that tickles the nose. Someone is already snoring, sprawled on a mat in the corner. A dog thumps its tail once, then drifts back into dreams. And you too curl up, feeling the security of knowing that out there, on the wide road, others watch the night. There's comfort in that, in being a tiny link in a chain that spans continents, yet knowing your place in it is safe. Now, let's admit something. Not everyone was thrilled about the empire's eternal roads. A few scholars, sitting in dusty European monasteries, might grumble, "First the Mongols burned our libraries, now they send us spicy food that upsets my stomach." And surely, somewhere, a weary camel groaned, "Oh, wonderful, more silk, just what I needed to carry." But the truth is, even the grumbling became part of the story, because the connections were too strong to resist. A monk who once cursed pepper for its heat might secretly sneak it into his stew the next winter, unable to forget the taste. That's how cultures change, one reluctant spoonful at a time.
So what does this leave us with in this alternate history? A Silk Road that never closed, an empire that understood unity not just as conquest, but as continuity. Cities alive with exchange, markets where languages blended like music, inventions shared centuries early, faiths coexisting imperfectly but persistently. And in that, a world that grew smaller sooner, stitched together not by walls but by roads. Now, let's dim the lanterns. The caravan has settled for the night, the camels resting, the fires burning low. You can almost hear the quiet crackle of embers, the shifting of sand in the desert wind, the soft breathing of travelers curled in their blankets. Here, in this gentle imagining, you are safe too. No raiders, no danger, only the hum of the empire's protection, the certainty of connection, and the slow rhythm of sleep pressing in. So let the world fade, let the stars guide your dreams, and drift, softly, calmly, into rest.
Drift with me now into the quiet hum of city streets. The hoofbeats and caravans of the old Silk Road still echo in the distance, but here, in the towns and capitals of the unbroken Mongol Empire, another rhythm unfolds, the steady pulse of daily life. Imagine doors creaking open at dawn, incense curling from shrines, the chatter of market sellers, and the shuffle of scribes dipping pens in ink. This is the heart of a world that never splintered, not a shattered quilt of khanates, but a single vast fabric, woven and rewoven over centuries. Let's walk its streets together, slowly, lantern light in hand. In our true history, the Mongols' capital shifted with each generation. Karakorum in the steppe, then Khanbalik, Beijing under the Yuan. Each was powerful, but each was temporary, fading when the empire itself fractured. But now, imagine otherwise. In this alternate world, the eternal empire builds a capital meant to last, drawing the best architects, engineers, and dreamers from across its lands. The city rises where steppe meets river, designed not to conquer, but to unite. Its avenues are wide enough for processions of horsemen, yet shaded by rows of trees carried from distant lands. At its heart is a great palace, a blend of Chinese timber halls, Persian tiled courtyards, and Russian domes gleaming under the sun. And every corner of it hums. Workshops clang with iron, bakeries exhaling warm air, scribes scratching on parchment, and somewhere a court musician plucks a lute whose strings sing both Mongol and Arabic melodies. If Rome had its forum and Beijing its forbidden city, this eternal Mongol capital would be remembered as the city where the world lived side by side. Let's follow the city waking. The first sound is always the animals. Roosters crow, dogs bark at nothing in particular, and somewhere a donkey brays as if it's trying to join the morning choir. A herdsman coaxes cattle through the gate, grumbling that the beasts always know when he's in a hurry and walks slower just to spite him. Then the markets stir. Bakers lift the lids of tandoors, pulling out flatbreads that steam in the cool morning air. Children dash between stalls, carrying baskets that look twice their size. Spices hit your nose before your eyes can name them. Cardamom, cinnamon, fennel, cumin. Scribes begin their day too, rolling out scrolls and warming their fingers by braziers. They gossip quietly about court news, who has risen, who has fallen, and who was caught napping during a council session. Apparently, even in the eternal empire, politics could be a bit dull. The city is awake, and so are we. One of the most striking things about a world-spanning empire is the chatter. Walk 20 paces and you'll hear 4 tongues. A merchant haggles in Persian with a Mongol overseer, then switches to Turkic when a caravan master interrupts. A Chinese trader shouts numbers over the din, his voice swallowed by the clink of coins. In a quiet corner, a monk mutters Latin prayers. It could be confusing, yes. Imagine trying to buy bread and ending up with a camel because you mixed up 2 similar-sounding words. Yet over time, people learn to flow between languages, like streams joining a river. The empire's people are polyglot, nimble with words, proud of being able to switch mid-sentence if it helps. Somewhere in this world, a scholar surely writes a joke. A Mongol, a Persian, and a Venetian walk into a tavern, and they actually understand each other because the empire made sure they did. Now, step inside one of the homes. At first glance, it looks Mongol, low, round, with a hearth at the center. But look closer. The walls are painted with Persian patterns. The carpets are Anatolian. The porcelain bowls come from China, and on a shelf rests an icon painted in the Byzantine style. Children here grow up eating noodles and dumplings one day, kebabs the next, and sweet honey cakes on festival mornings. The lines between cultures blur until they aren't lines at all, but the threads of one fabric. Even the music carries this blend. A child might grow up knowing lullabies that mix Mongol throat singing with Persian rhyme. If you were lucky enough to be rocked to sleep here, you'd hear melodies that carried half the world in their notes. Religion under the Eternal Empire remains tolerant if pragmatic. On one street, you'll see a mosque's minaret lifting into the sky. 2 streets further, incense drifts from a Buddhist monastery. On the next corner, a Christian bell tolls. Festivals overlap, and at times it's almost comical. Imagine a devout Muslim fasting for Ramadan, passing a Buddhist neighbor lighting lanterns for Vesak, while down the lane a Christian household roasts lamb for Easter. A street child, clever and curious, probably sneaks between all 3 houses, pocketing dates, sweet buns, and dumplings with a grin. The Khans in this imagined world are wise enough to know that unity does not mean uniformity. They let these traditions coexist, sometimes uneasily, but always side by side. In time, new festivals emerge that belong to everyone. Empire-wide days of celebration where Mongols, Persians, Chinese, and Slavs join in feasting together. Every great city needs its thinkers, and here they gather in libraries funded by Khans who understand that power lies not only in swords, but in scrolls. Picture a hall with walls lined by shelves, Chinese bamboo slips, Arabic manuscripts, Indian palm leaf texts, Greek codices. Lamps burn steadily as scholars debate across cultures. One man reads Hippocrates, while another scribbles notes about acupuncture. A woman from Persia discusses star charts with a monk from Tibet. A translator sighs heavily, surrounded by piles of paper, muttering that Mongol grammar is enough to drive anyone mad, but he keeps at it, because without him, the knowledge cannot flow. And knowledge does flow. Algebra, astronomy, medicine, architecture, all leap forward. Imagine a world where printing spreads early and widely, where books are not rare jewels, but ever-present companions. The Eternal Empire becomes not just a conqueror, but a teacher.
Let's not forget the nights. The city at dusk is alive with sound. Street musicians sit by lantern light, plucking strings, blowing flutes, tapping drums. Children dance in circles while elders clap along. You hear melodies you recognize and melodies you don't, all stitched together like patchwork. A Persian oud hums alongside a Chinese erhu. Mongol throat singers blend with Byzantine hymns. At first, it might sound strange, clashing even. But then, as you listen longer, it becomes a harmony that could only be born in this world. And in some corner, a weary guard dozes, head bobbing to the rhythm. Even duty can't silence music forever. Amid all this grandeur, remember the small joys. A child chasing a kite across the rooftops. A grandmother bargaining for figs, pretending to scowl though she loves the game. A blacksmith wiping sweat from his brow, proud of the iron gate he forged. Empires are not only measured by battles and borders. They live in these quiet moments, in the laughter of neighbors, in the smell of supper drifting through an alley, in the comfort of lying down at night knowing the roads are open and safe. Of course, city life was never perfect. A Mongol noble visiting from the steppe might mutter, "Too many walls here. Give me a tent any day." Meanwhile, a city merchant, dragged to the steppe for business, might mutter, "Too few walls here. Where am I supposed to hang my curtains?" And somewhere, a poor clerk probably spilled ink on an imperial decree and panicked for an entire week, convinced he doomed himself. He hadn't. The Khans were strict, but surely not about smudges. Humor, even quiet humor, weaves through city life. It always does. Now, as night deepens, let's pause. The markets have closed, shutters drawn. A last lantern swings in the breeze, its flame steady. Somewhere in the distance, temple bells toll the hour. Families gather indoors, voices soft, children drifting into sleep.
The hearth glows faintly, the smell of bread still lingering. Outside, the streets are hushed, watched over by guards pacing with slow steps. The Eternal Empire's capital sleeps, not in fear, not in chaos, but in the calm of a world held together. So let your own eyes close too. Imagine lying on a woven rug, the hum of the city fading into stillness. You are safe here, safe under the wide sky of a united world. Drift slowly into rest.
Drift with me now into the Empire's far horizon, a world that never broke, a world where the Mongol banner still stretched across mountains, deserts, and seas. We have wandered its roads, walked its markets, and lingered in its cities. But what happens when centuries pass, when children grow old and their children grow older still, under a sky that has never seen the Empire fracture? This is the long dawn of the eternal Mongol Empire. Let's sit with it together, slowly, as the night deepens. History in our world moved like a tide. The Mongols rose like a storm, then ebbed, leaving behind fragments: the Yuan in China, the Ilkhanate in Persia, the Golden Horde in the steppes. Their unity was brief, their legacy scattered. But here, in our imagining, the tide never retreated. The empire remained, century after century. Generations of Khans learned that power was not only taken with the bow, but kept with law and learning. The steppe riders became rulers of cities as well as plains, governors of farms as well as herds. The eternal empire stretched not for decades, but for ages, and so the world itself bent differently. Picture a farm on the edge of the empire. In the early morning, a family tends to wheat fields, their plows drawn not by oxen alone, but by improved tools, inventions spread early across the empire's unbroken roads. The farmer wipes his brow, muttering about taxes, of course, because no matter the century, no matter the empire, someone is always muttering about taxes. His wife rolls her eyes, knowing he'll pay them anyway, because the collectors ride with the empire's seal, and there's no arguing with that. Their children, though, have different lives than in our own history. They go to school in a nearby town, where their lessons are written in a standardized script and their native tongue. They learn stories not of isolated kingdoms, but of a single realm stretching as far as imagination. They recite poems in Mongolian, write sums in Arabic numerals, and read parables carried from China. Their world is bigger than their village, because the empire made it so. At night, after supper, the family sits by firelight. The grandmother hums a song she learned in her youth, a tune brought by a caravan from Samarkand. The children yawn, the father stretches, the mother sighs. Outside, the roads are safe, guarded, watched. Inside, life continues, quietly, steadily, in the glow of continuity. Now, shift from the village to the palace. Here, the Eternal Empire nurtures art that blends East and West into forms our own history never saw. Miniature paintings bloom with Mongol horsemen riding through Persian gardens. Calligraphers write poems in 3 scripts side by side, Chinese brushwork flowing into Arabic script, joined by Cyrillic lettering at the bottom. Imagine theaters where Mongol epics are sung like operas, with musicians from Greece, India, and China sharing one stage. Or architects building vast structures, domes that borrow Byzantine grace, tiled facades glowing with Persian blue, woodwork carved with Chinese dragons, and at the summit, a simple steppe symbol, the eternal knot of the horse lords. Even food becomes a canvas of empire. A noble's banquet might serve roast lamb stuffed with rice and spices, noodles swimming in broth, dumplings dusted with saffron, and for dessert, sweet pastries dripping with honey. One courtier jokes, "Our empire conquers stomachs as much as lands," before sneaking another dumpling when no one is looking. What about lands that once stood outside? Europe, Africa, and the far seas. In this alternate world, they grow in the shadow of the eternal empire's presence. European kingdoms, cautious and respectful, send envoys instead of armies. Ships sail more boldly, knowing the Mongol ports are open to trade. Africa's merchants find markets eager for gold and ivory, while learning technologies that arrive centuries sooner. And across the seas, the New World waits. In our own history, Columbus set sail searching for Asia. In this world, perhaps, it is the eternal empire itself that launches ships, its sailors curious to see beyond their horizon. What might happen if Mongol horsemen, their saddles traded for sails, were the first to step onto American shores? It is a question that drifts into dreams, unanswered but rich with possibility. Yet even in this imagining, empire has its shadows. To keep around this vast requires taxes, armies, and discipline. Some villages grumble at the weight of tribute. Some conquered peoples chafe, wishing for independence. Somewhere, a poet sighs into his wine, writing verses about freedom under the moon.
And yet, rebellion never sparks. The empire endures, not because it is flawless, but because it bends instead of breaks. Governors change, reforms come and go, but the banner remains. Its weight is steady, its presence constant. There's a comfort in that, even if it feels heavy, like a quilt tucked too tightly around you. You might shift, but you remain warm. Imagine yourself now, not as a traveler or a scholar, but as someone born into this world centuries after the conquests. For you, the eternal empire is not a story, it is the only story. You grow up hearing lullabies of Genghis and Kublai, sung as if they were not conquerors, but kindly ancestors. You walk through markets filled with goods from lands you'll never see, but which feel familiar because they've always been here. You kneel in temples where prayers mix languages, and it does not strike you as odd. Your grandmother tells you, "When I was your age, my grandmother told me the same stories, and her grandmother told her the same." Continuity stretches like an endless chain, unbroken, strong. And so you live, work, love, grow old, and die under the eternal empire sky, never questioning whether it might one day fade, because to you it has always been. Of course, eternity has its quirks. Imagine a court scribe grumbling, "Do you know how many decrees I've written for this empire? I think my ink pot is older than I am." Or a farmer rolling his eyes, "The empire protects us, yes, but could it also send someone to fix my fence?" Even Khans themselves might laugh, sitting around a fire, one saying to the other, "My ancestor conquered half the world in a year. I just conquered a pile of paperwork." Humor, small and wry, is the oil that keeps the gears of empire turning. Without it, perhaps even eternity would feel too heavy to carry. And so, centuries pass. Roads stay open,
Caravans keep moving, cities glow, families eat, children grow, scholars debate, musicians sing, farmers mutter, guards yawn, and the empire continues. It is less a story of war and conquest now, and more a story of rhythm. Like the steady clop of hooves on the steppe, it beats on, reliable, enduring, eternal. The eternal Mongol Empire becomes not a flash of lightning, but a long dawn, the kind of light that does not fade, but brightens slowly, steadily, until the whole sky is filled. Now, let us set down our lanterns. We have walked through the unbroken empire, across its roads, into its markets, through its cities, into its homes. We have tasted its food, heard its songs, laughed at its quirks, and seen how it shaped not just history, but daily life. And now, as the night deepens, it is time to rest. Picture yourself lying under the eternal empire's sky. The stars are scattered, bright and endless, the same stars caravans once followed. The roads are quiet, the fires are low, the air is cool and safe and still. Breathe deeply, let the centuries slip away, let the empire fade into the gentle hum of sleep. For though this imagining is vast, your world right now is simple. Your breath, your blanket, your rest. So, close your eyes, drift slowly, peacefully. The empire is eternal in story, but your sleep is eternal for this night. Rest well, traveler. Tomorrow will come, but tonight you are safe in dreams.